This will be a day long remembered. Now I am the master.
Welcome to another episode of Legends and Theories.
He is the Tom Clancy of comics. That all of our stories were going to be rooted in reality. All of the military equipment that we depicted, all of the airplanes that we depicted, were all real. I got the PR guy for the Air Force to help me with various things. And the fun thing is that my artist was in Argentina. And so he didn't know what anything looked like. So I was having to send down photos of everything all around Washington, D.C. constantly. And in the climax of one of our stories, we have a thing where we crash a C5 Galaxy airliner into the middle of the reflecting pool in front of the Capitol building. And there's only one way you can do that and bring it in and actually not hit a building. And so I had to send maps and everything. And I realized as I was sending this stuff, the National Security Agency is probably reading all of my emails. So I started putting at the end of all of my emails, hey, you NSA guys, we're reading this on Echelon or whatever it is that you're using. This is a comic book. I'll send you one. If you want to see it, please don't turn me away. So yeah, the consequence of that series is the villain of that storyline ended up as the villain in Ant-Man the Wasp, one of the two villains. So the character Sonny Birch that gets played by Walton Goggins, that was our character from that Iron Man storyline. And White Lotus as well, yes, that I have not seen. But I hear it's something. So yeah, and actually Marvel very coolly sent me and my artist from Argentina to the premiere of the movie. He did not speak English and he had no idea why he was there. And I've got a little Russian, which is not going to help me in France or Greece or any place I'm going. And so we were actually there in the Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, where we're seeing the premiere of the movie with all of the people that are in the who produced the movie, and cheers are going up as the credits are going on, and again, my friend Jorge Lucas has no idea what's happening here because Walton Goggins looks nothing at all like the guy that we drew in the comic books. And so, you're watching the movie, the credits are going off, and we see all of our names. All the Marvel people, they had us in the second row. It is the world's largest IMAX theater. This is not the best place to watch a movie from. But you can see when they get to the credits, because at the end of the credits, they have special thanks to these people, special thanks to all the Marvel folks. And so for us, it was all the names were going across the screen, and then suddenly is my name 12 feet across up here, and everybody's cheering, and Jorge is cheering, and I'm like, Jorge, no, look over there. Your name is way over there, a football field away on the other side. Did not see it, and it was not until the after party that we're there, and the woman from Disney comes up and she says, Mr. Miller, is there anything that we at the Walt Disney Corporation can do to make your evening more magical? And I say, please find me somebody who speaks Spanish and English equally well. And so she went and found somebody. I was able to say, here's Walton Goggins, here's the photo, or here's the panel that you drew in the comics. It's the same guy. You're in the movie. You're right there. And suddenly, it was the best day of his life, and he was running off to try to find Paul Burton. And I was like, we don't go talk to Paul. That's not what we get to do. We're lowly comic book people. We don't actually do that. But that actually sort of ties in to what we're talking about here, in a sense, when I talk about lowly comic book people. The persecution complex that the comics industry, the comics fans had for many, many years, we sort of carried along with us into this period where comics have taken over the world, into this period where comics are super famous, into this period where comics are a billion-dollar business, into this period where people are reading comic books everywhere. I remember being in Union Station here. I live in Wisconsin, but I travel by train sometimes. Being in Union Station here 25 years ago, And you know, I had brought a comic book or a graphic novel, and I had brought another magazine or something to put around it like it was something, you know, I shouldn't have, because it was not something a grown-up was normally reading when I was growing up. It was kid stuff. And on the train, I was seeing kids reading manga, other people reading stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened? How did this happen? This is part of what happened. I remember I wrote a column for Comics Buyer's Guide that said, with the title, "Have We No Shame? What happened to us being ashamed of being fans?" We're not anymore. And part of it is what Tim Burton brought, and also what Michael Keaton and DC Comics and everybody along. We are right almost at 11. So when the doors close, we'll roll. So. From C2E2 to Sunday morning, you have survived. You'll note there are no panels before 11 a.m. That is because everybody who has ever worked at a convention in America in the last 30 years has demanded that there not be anything before 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning. The last time I had a panel before 9 a.m., and there were exactly the same number of people in the audience as on the panel. We all dismissed the entire thing and went to IHOP. Just not gonna do that. I am John Jackson Miller. I am a writer of many things and many franchises. Just to really quickly get into it, I've worked for Marvel, Star Wars, Lucasfilm, 20th Century Fox, BioWare, Heroic Signatures, that's the Conan people, Paramount, Star Trek, Ubisoft, video game company, Warner Brothers with and DC with regard to Batman, and Halo with 343 and Microsoft. And this is more specifically in Star Wars. I've done a variety of comics, graphic novels, both for Marvel and IDW and Star Wars itself. I've also done like a lot of novels, including Kenobi, my most recent novel that came out last year, The Living Force of Star Wars, and Star Trek. I've done many novels for that as well, including 4 novels for the streaming series that I work with the folks at Paramount on. And then finally, other just random franchises. My first work with Marvel was Crimson Dynamo years ago. Iron Man, I already mentioned here. Simpsons, Indiana Jones, I wrote the adaptation for the Crystal Skull. Mass Effect, Halo, other stuff, video game, comics, and Planet of the Apes. 40th anniversary book for Battlestar Galactica, graphic novel. That was depressing because I realized as we got working on the book that I was the only person working on that comic book that was alive when the show was on. That was eye-opening. And I've even written graphic novels, original ones for Dumbo and Lion King. Dumbo being my first brush with Tim Burton because that was a Tim Burton movie, the live-action one that we were tying into, and it had Michael Keaton and Danny DeVito in it. So that was a thing. And then I've also done stuff for video games. You may also have seen my name in connection with Comic-Con. I mentioned that I worked in comics in I worked in comics in the nonfiction side of things, editing magazines for Comics Buyer's Guide, Comics Retailer for years. When I quit to write full time, I started running Comic-Con. It is the world's largest public database of comic book sales figures. And so I've got a lot of history that is going on in anything that I'm dealing with. And this brings us to my current novel. This is Batman Resurrection, which came out in October. It is the first novel tying into the Tim Burton Batman movies. After all those other things, people would say, what's your dream job? This is the thing I never dreamt I could ask about, because this isn't just writing a Batman novel, but this is writing a Batman novel specific to Batman and Batman Returns, the 2 Tim Burton movies. And it was a very important movie for me, a very important thing to get, in part because, as I mentioned before, in comics we always kind of had a persecution complex as an industry and as fans, that unless you're of a certain age, you probably don't remember this feeling of comics being for kids, or comics being a low-class form of entertainment, comics being second class. And this is the picture, this is the movie that really did what we thought was impossible. It told everybody else about the serious stuff that we were doing in comics by that point. the stuff we were not getting credit for at that point. And so I want to take us back as far as we can go. Comic books started in the 1930s as a way to keep the presses running on the weekends only. They didn't care what was in, they were the most disposable of things. In newspapers, Eastern Color Press was a newspaper publisher. They wanted to find a way to keep the presses running on the weekend, so they got all of the comic strips that were in the newspaper and they just put them in these comic books, these magazines. And they sold like crazy. It didn't matter that the paper was terrible, it didn't matter that it was reprint material, it all sold like crazy. And so we decided, as a publishing industry, let's create some new things, new characters, new ideas. Most important one of these, you really need to have one of these in your house. If you don't, you're not, like get one. Superman shows up 1938, April, from National Periodical Publications. That is the predecessor to DC Comics. What does DC Comics stand for? Anyone? Detective Comics. Detective Comics 27. First comes out March 30th, 1939. So DC Comics is really Detective Comics comics. Nobody cares. And it was by Bob Kane, Bill Finger, Jerry Robinson, and it was really of a piece with the kind of noir-style heroes that we were getting in the 1930s, what we call pulp heroes. In addition to comic books, they had pulp magazines out, like the Shadow magazine, where these were weekly or sometimes bi-weekly collections of short stories following characters. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The Shadow knows. We also had the Phantom, Lee Falk's character for the comic strips. And we also had radio going on at the same time. So all these things were creating characters that were sort of anti-hero, detectives, some of them. Some wore masks, darker than everything else. And so it's no real surprise that the early Batman is Batman with a gun. Batman with a gun, August 30, 1939. This is our 6th comic book Batman is in. It's notable because he kills all of the vampires on Earth with a gun. And Julie Madison hugs him afterward and says, "I shall be forever grateful. I don't know who you are. I shall be forever grateful." Well, the comics at this point were really catching on. DC realized that they needed to put him in his own title, and they needed to soften it up a bit. He needed to stop shooting people. And so they gave him a teenage sidekick, Robin. And so Robin is right there at the beginning, the first issue, 1940. So is the Joker in the interior of the issue. And so we're starting to get these exotic villains, a la Dick Tracy, which was also happening in the newspaper, that had exotic villains that Batman would fight. And here we have the Penguin coming along in 1941, and then we have Catwoman's first cover appearance, 1947. So there's a certain different mood to the early stuff from what happens in the 40s. That is going to continue to change. It continues to change even after, here we have the Riddler, 1948. By late 40s, early 50s, comics are huge. Everybody's reading them. They have print runs in the millions. They're selling in the millions. And this comes along. 1954, this is the era of the Red Scare. A man, Frederick Warner, if you don't know his name, you don't know most of comics history. Everything has to do with what happened in 1954. He was the head psychologist for the state of New York, head psychiatrist for the state of New York. And he wrote a bunch of articles for women's magazines, and then a book called Seduction of the Innocent, which basically claimed that comic books were rotting children's brains. They were turning them into juvenile delinquents. They were full of sex, drugs, innuendo, murder, all of these horrible things. And part of how he did his research was that he went to all the juvenile delinquents' homes, and he would talk to the kids, and he would ask if they read comic books, and they all said yes. Well, every kid read comics back then, so that wasn't really the best possible way to do it. But the result of it was a series of Senate subcommittee hearings that was really not so much, if you go and read them, about the naughty comic books. It was about the fact that the comics distribution side of things was run by the mafia. And that's another whole other thing that they were concerned with and interested in. But what happened is that the publishers themselves said, okay, we're gonna actually police ourselves. Half the publishers just quit. They gave up. They said, we're not gonna do this anymore. Some publishers, like EC Comics, that did all the creepy and not creepy, but the Tales from the Crypt and all those kind of magazines. They just said, okay, we're going to take Mad Comics and we're going to make it a magazine. It ended up being the best-selling magazine in comics of all. And everybody else got together and said, all right, we're going to police ourselves with the Comics Magazine Association of America. Comics Magazine Association of America is what gives you the spinner rack. The spinner rack, a lot of you people who've been fans forever might remember them in grocery stores or whatever. People were very fond of the spinner racks. The spinner racks were actually a way to keep stores from getting rid of comics entirely, because they didn't want them at all. Because comics never were profitable in those days. They were 10 cents for years, then they were 12 cents. They never went up with inflation. And it isn't until later that comics actually started to become profitable on their own. But that's what they did. And the result for the people doing the comics is they had to make the comics even lighter, even simpler, even goofier. Crime could not pay. Couldn't show violence, couldn't show anything sexual. Here we have Bat-Hound in 1955. Here we have Batwoman's introduction. She's marrying Batman in 1959. We get increasingly sillier stories with a variety of more colorful characters. Batman shows up in 1961, and then Batman becomes Batbaby here in 1962. So what's happening over at Marvel at this point, 1961, is they've had Fantastic Four. And so the Marvel thing is starting to become a backlash to this, to a degree. DC does have its own part of the Silver Age of comics in the Flash and the Green Lantern happening at this point, but it's late to get to the Batman desk. And so we have a situation here where by the time we get to the 1960s, Batman is nowhere near one of the top sellers. Batman actually had never by this point been number one. The number one character at DC was Superman. The number two character was Superboy, who is also Superman. So that's awesome. I think that's cheating. I think that's cheating. But that's where things stood in 1960. The number one publisher, by the way, was Disney's publisher, Dell, which was being published up here out of Racine, and they imploded in about 1962, around the time the comics went up in price. Well, what happens here to change things? Batman would never become number one until this happened. The Batman TV show, January 12, 1966, it is something that lands in a United States that has now got televisions, there's a television in everybody's home. There's color TV showing up in everybody's homes. The Beatles have just arrived on TV in 1964. Later, in 1966, Star Trek starts. So we're in an era where things become big fads. The baby boomers is a demographic thing going on. It's becoming a real big thing. And so Batman with Adam West and Burt Ward, that's right. Burt Ward debuts in January of 1966, and they debut with a gimmick. Every week there would be 2 episodes on consecutive nights. And so it would be part 1. And at the end of it would be, how will the Cape Crusader escape from this particular trap? Tune in tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel. And it became a huge deal. The song became big, the theme song, the Batusi, which was a dance, became a big thing. And it was a fad. And the thing is, people knew it was a fad at the time. It went to they did a movie version by the summer of 1966. They had to strike while the iron was hot. They brought in all of the major Rogues Gallery folks from the TV show. And as I mentioned, This is June of '66, so this was Mad Magazine, which was not published by DC at that point. So this was their parody that came out probably just 3 months in the craze they were writing this. And what he says is give the in-group garbage, make the show bad enough, and they'll call it camp, and they'll stay glued to their sets. And that was sort of the thing that everybody kind of understood, that while the kids were enjoying Batman, the older viewers were watching it ironically. Because it was goofy, it was something like that. The problem with something like that is it doesn't have any staying power. And the Batman series goes off in 2.5 years. It does not last as long as Star Trek does. And unlike Star Trek, which ended up having this big sort of industry of fans behind it, Batman does shoot up to #1 in 1966, but he goes right back down afterward. Goes right back down afterward. In comics, though, we're starting to do better and better work. Things have sort of turned around. In Batman at DC, the Neils, Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil, are doing detective-style stories, more serious stories in the Batman series, in the Detective Comics series as well. And we're getting new villains like Ra's al Ghul, or however you want to pronounce it. It's different in every place I hear it. And so there's better stuff. The problem is, in the pop culture, we are still on the 60s. And so we have Super Friends on TV in the mid-70s, and that's Adam West. And we have The New Adventures of Batman, which ends up being part of a 2-part show with Tarzan later on CBS. And in the second episode of The New Adventures of Batman, we get Batmite. Because again, they're thinking, oh, well, the kids are not going to be interested in a show about Batman fighting crime unless you have a silly alien, whatever the heck he is. And so this is the thing. This is what far more people are seeing than what's happening in the comics. Comic books are being read by people in the tens of thousands. The TV shows are being seen in the millions. And so it was that when we got to 1985, by 1985, the comic book store has come along. All of the people who grew up buying comics on the spinner racks have now moved on to starting their own comic shops. We're buying the comics directly from the publishers. We don't have to have the comics code anymore, so we can have more serious stuff going on. And the result is that the sales improve, more serious stuff is happening. X-Men is up to 500,000 copies, but look where Batman is. This is before a certain thing happens. Batman is down 29th place. In fact, it's all Marvel on that chart, except for Teen Titans. Teen Titans was the most X-Men-like book that they had at DC, written by former Marvel writers and artists. So, but what happens to change it? Before I do that, let me go back real quick. In the general pop culture, there is a bit of a renaissance for a moment. There's a hope. The Superman movies by Richard Donner and the Salkinds do treat Superman with respect. And we're thinking, okay, maybe people are going to come around on this stuff and catch up with us. Well, Marvel's problem is Marvel didn't have anybody working with it on the movie side. So, we have Marvel's TV shows on CBS. The Nicholas Hammond Spider-Man who was just running around throwing nets on people. I like the Peter Hooten Doctor Strange one. That's Jessica Walter from Arrested Development as Morgan Le Fay. That's Red Brown as Captain America. Probably the less said about that, the better. And the most successful of these shows was the one that was the least like the comic book. And that was Lou Ferrigno and Bill Bixby and the Incredible Hulk, which was just a redo of the TV show The Fugitive. Which is a good thing to do, but again, it didn't have a heck of a lot to do with comics. And so the comics movies that people were seeing in the really big numbers, what people thought of comics, we've got Superman 3 and Superman 4. And Superman 4 is the last superhero movie that people get before Batman 89. So it's no wonder that when I was growing up, we definitely had that persecution complex thing going, that people did not know what was going on in our field. What was going on in our field was much different than what everybody else thought. This is when Marvel was sold in 1988, the headline in the New York Daily News, Biff Pow Bam. Every article about comics would have something like, holy guacamole, comics are actually worth money, can you believe it, or whatever it is. They never took anything seriously because the pop cultural, the wider public, their opinion of comics was stuck in Adam West world. And so there was actually a resentment from a lot of folks of that series. I did come around on it later on, but certainly at the time I was concerned about it. And it was because they weren't reflecting what we were seeing in the stores, because Frank Miller had showed up. He had done Daredevil at Marvel, he had done Ronin at DC. He comes along, he does a serious Dark Knight. He rewrites the origin story in 1986, year one. And then we also have some really serious stuff happening, thanks to Alan Moore and The Killing Joke, 1988. So this is the stuff that Tim Burton is looking at, is aware of when we're getting to this part. We are rescued by a hero. Michael Uslan, former comics writer, fan, he bought the rights to Batman movies along with another producer named Benjamin Melniker. Got the rights in the early 80s. Struggled to get a movie made with Batman. Over and over and over. How can we get this movie done? It went through multiple hands. Steve Englehart was attached to it for a while. Harlan Ellison's name was out there for a while. All sorts of things. They couldn't actually get it going. And we in the field were getting terrified. And we got particularly terrified when they finally did say, hey, look, our director is going to be Tim Burton. Our star is going to be Michael Keaton. How many people have heard of the backlash to Michael Keaton being cast? How many people think it was an urban myth or that it's been overstated? Okay, you're clever to not say so, because Beetlejuice was their last production, and this is Comics Buyer's Guide. Before you guys had the internet, our newspaper, Comics Buyer's Guide, was coming out every week, and we had letters to the editor. Why is everyone defending the choice of Michael Keaton as Batman? Isn't there anyone out there that will admit they made a mistake? This is going to set comics back 20 years. Read that phrasing. Set us back 20 years. We're worried about it. Here's the idea. Let's cast Woody Allen as Rorschach. Let's face it, they're not after our approval. It's after people who remember Batman as a buffoon with a twerp with a sidekick. I fear the Prince music will overshadow. They're mad at Prince. Don't do that. I fear the Prince music. Will people accept music that doesn't have the na-na-na-na-na-na-na Batman theme? I just saw Beetlejuice, and this is a future Marvel editor writing this. I just saw Beetlejuice. I'm not sure Tim Burton is the right director for the job. He needs more. I don't want to see Batman fight a talking chair. There was a talking chair in Pee-wee's Playhouse, which came from the mind of Burton. And this is a friend of mine. He knows I'm embarrassing. This is a later publisher says this is going to set us back 15 years. Best thing we can hope for is a bomb the size of Supergirl that nobody will notice it. There were petitions that people wrote. We don't want to offend poor actors or anything. Please write intelligent letters only. But we do not want this. We do not want this picture. This was a comic in Comics Buyer's Guide. Holy celluloid. It's another bat crime caused by that bat casting. Now the thing is, the people who knew Tim Burton, the people who knew Michael Uslan, the people who had seen Michael Keaton in a movie called Clean and Sober the previous year, knew he could do serious stuff. But they were concerned. DC was concerned enough about it, or rather Warner Brothers was concerned about it, that they pushed out a trailer before they were even ready. It ran with a movie called Tequila Sunrise, which is ironic because it's got Michelle Pfeiffer in it. It is a case where many of the people, and some said most of the people who went to see the movie, went to see the Batman trailer and stayed just for it. It is not a great trailer because there's no music. There's not much in the way of narrative to it. It is just sort of, but it gives you some of the key moments. But it doesn't even have the title of the movie. It doesn't have the logo. It doesn't have anything. They just sort of threw it out there. But by this point, the comic shops are kind of going, hey, you know what? and the distributors are saying, we better start bulking up on this stuff. We better get as much as we possibly can, because we think this is actually going to happen. And so what happens here is they finally get out the real trailer in Cadillac. And let's see if I can make this happen. Gonna work? Oh, I'm just working. All right. What was missing from that trailer? The title. That is the most successful advertising image in movie history. It was everywhere in May and June of 1989. People were shaving it into their heads. T-shirts everywhere. It was all over the place. And so this is one of the greatest summers in movie history, in the sense that in terms of blockbusters. We had Indiana Jones 3, we had Star Trek 5, we had Ghostbusters 2. That came out the week before Batman. I was terrified. I was editing my campus paper at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I was there for the summer. There was nothing to do all year. I assigned myself reviews. I went and reviewed Star Trek 5. I kind of liked it. I've changed my mind. But I went to the mall, and this particular mall, to go see this film. And I bought my ticket at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for the 10 o'clock Thursday night showing. And I was terrified. And I just hid in the rest of the mall. And then I came back right as the movie was about to start, and I saw for the first time there were people in Joker makeup. There were people that had brought a huge black bed sheet with holes cut in it, and they spread it across the seats. While the movie is starting, it starts up. We get the Danny Elfman music. We got our first look at a place that does not exist. Anton Furst's Gotham City that he invented. The first line we hear is from Prince on a passing car. I have seen the future, and by the time you get to the end of the movie, and what happens? No spoilers. What happens to the Joker at the end of the movie? And we're like, did that even happen? Did they let him do that? Did this happen? And we get to the end, and the music is climbing, and we're following the camera up to the top of the building where Batman is triumphantly looking at the bat signal, and we get to this moment, and everybody roars. And my thought at the time was, this film has just redeemed comics in the pop culture, not just Batman, all of it. It will never be the same again. I would go 12 times. I would go 12 times. I would write an initial review in my newspaper, New Batman Treats Legend with Respect. I'd come back when the students came back from summer, and I would do it again because I had seen it a bunch more times. And I had actual bones to pick with plot points. I'll get to that in a moment. But this is a huge deal. I bought a Batman standee, which I kept in my office as the editor of the student paper. The other students would shoot rubber bands at me, saying, no, we were shooting at Batman. That was not me at the time, but anyway. And in the Comics Buyer's Guide, that Keaton fellow wasn't half bad. So, this does not actually start to echo into the comics industry. The comics industry has a great summer. This is the beginning of the huge boom of the early 90s. The fact that people are coming in for Batman stuff, comic shops happen to have it. They had Lonely Place of Dying was what was going on in the Batman comics at the time. Robin, the new Robin was happening in those comics. But they didn't have anything new yet that was actually reacting to the sales of this movie. The movie made $48 million the first weekend. The movie was, in Knoxville, the movie did so well that they took, in one theater, they took Ghostbusters off of the screen, and they actually only had one print. So they ran the film strip down the hall, snaking around from one machine to the other so they could put it on extra screens. So it was that big a deal. In the comic shops, though, the first thing they were actually able to start ordering was in July for October 12th, 1989. A new series, the first new series for Batman in 30 years. And they sold so many pre-orders that DC panicked. They said, oh my gosh, the printer will be going constantly. Paul Levitt said, we've got to do something to save the retailers when these millions of comics show up. So they gave it 4 different covers. 4 different variant covers, only difference is the color on them. Everybody went out and bought them anyway, and this was the beginning of the variant cover craze. They accidentally started it. And that would go on to change things. However, things are changing in Hollywood. The first thing they start changing is the advertising folks are able to actually change their ad campaigns. Dick Tracy, which came out from Disney in 1990. What's missing there? Title of the movie. Captain America movie, about the less said the better. It did not come out at the time. Once again, they made a big deal about the symbol. And they were themselves using the symbol in other projects like The Flash. The commercials for The Flash were leaning heavy into just a wordless symbol back when it was on CBS in 1990. And when they got around to doing Batman Returns, once again, they leaned into the symbol. And of course, there's a different version of the poster. Batman the Animated Series is would not have happened without Batman '89, and it really kind of captured an original mood. Other movies that were starting to come out that were not actually going to get big releases got big releases because people saw what happened to Batman. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, even though it had a TV show, that was a small press comic book that came out in 1984. Basically with a 2,000 copy print run, sold only through Comics Buyer's Guide. And they opened a movie in March of '90. Darkman is not a comic book movie, but it's Sam Raimi, and everything about that story is a comic book origin story. So we get projects like The Rocketeer in '91, small press comic book, period piece. Can anybody imagine this movie being possible without Tim Burton's movie having been successful? And then I think this culminates in the rock opera The Crow, 5 years after Batman. And this is violent, it is wonderful, it is something that I cannot imagine possibly happening. So they've changed movies. They've changed the perception of comics, they've changed movies. They just didn't change Batman. Because what happened is, after Batman Returns, for the first Batman, the fast food licensee was Taco Bell. So it was like a 3rd-tier licensee. By the second one, McDonald's was in. Everybody was all in. And what McDonald's got was a darker, more serious movie. Gene Siskel from your local area here called it an opera about loneliness. I like that a lot. But McDonald's didn't like the fact that the penguin bites off somebody's nose. And so what happens is they end up switching to a different director, Schumacher. They end up with their plan for the 3rd movie. They bring in the star of another one of the small press comics that got a movie, The Mask. Jim Carrey shows up in Batman Forever. And then we have Batman and Robin, which, again, I have a hard time. I don't complain about any of these movies now. At the time, yeah, I was really upset with Adam West. At the time, I was really upset with this. This is one of 2 movies I walked out of in my life, and I actually remember I had to go back inside because I forgot my wife was still in there. But in retrospect, I understand why they did it this way. This was the favorite version. The 1960s were the favorite of the people making the movie. And I also understand even the Adam West part and what they were riffing on. So everything sort of has its place. And so we end up going without anything for a long time. I would meet Mike Peluso once I was in the business. In 2000 at San Diego, I asked him, what's the deal with all the mood swings in these movies? And he said the way that he liked to look at it was that Batman was Batman in the 30s, Batman with a gun. Batman Returns was Batman in the 40s, where you have the beginning of the Rogues Gallery. Batman Forever was Batman in the 50s, where it's much more about Robin and it's getting a little sillier. And then Batman and Robin would end up being full Adam West. And so he had said at the time, he said, you would imagine if we kept doing films Our fifth movie would probably be about the 70s. Might be either Batman the Detective, maybe with Ra's al Ghul. And then you do The Dark Knight in the 80s. And then you do Bane in the 90s. And then you do something more sophisticated for the 2000s. And this was before Batman Begins was even a thing. He had said this. I said, well, that's really clever. That's really cool. As for me, and I'll get to a few questions here just right at the end when I got shot here. As for me, I went on to work for Comics Buyer's Guide. I went on to work for Comics Retail and Trade Magazine. We are best known for having helped shepherd Free Comic Book Day into existence, thanks to one of our columnists, Joe Field. And then I would go on writing Iron Man, Star Wars. We have these big books at my table. Please come get them. And also Kenobi, and I've also done a lot of stuff for Star Trek. Well, my editor contacted me he's my editor on Star Wars: The Living Force. He said, John, didn't you go see Batman 12 times in the theater? I said, yeah, I saved the ticket stubs. And he said, well, things have evolved here. We actually have the chance to license just the Tim Burton part of Batman. And I never would have known to ask for that. And it came about from a couple of things. They had already done Batman 66 comics back in the early 2010s. Basically, during the pandemic, Sam Hamm, the screenwriter, got together with Joe Quinones, one of my artists on Star Wars, and they did a Batman '89 comic series that did really well. At the same time, we have Michael Keaton showing up in The Flash around them, and they said, well, let's go ahead and do novels set in the Tim Burton movie era. And what I said is, okay, what I'll do is their comics are set after the movies. They're set after Batman Returns. I'm going to be in there. I'm going to hug the first movie. I'm going to be in between the two. So I'm going to be in that period writing about what happens to Bruce Wayne. What happens to Bruce Wayne realizing, oh, wait, the Joker in our version of, in Burtonverse, the Joker killed Batman's parents. Well, he's now taking care of that. What is his purpose in going on? The Batman, the Bruce Wayne in this world is also different from all the other Bruce Waynes. He's a responsible part of the community. We see him in Batman Returns telling Matt Schreck, the mayor and I are going to fight you on something. He's actually he's as active as Bruce Wayne as he is as Batman. We have a city which is reeling from what the Joker did, and what are the ramifications of that? We just had the world's largest chemical attack on a city in the United States. What happens after that? What does Alfred think? What should Alfred think about Bruce Wayne continuing to do this whole thing after taking care of what happened to the murder of his parents? And then what about Vicky Vale? Where did she go? And we were allowed to address that. And we can also bring in my favorite character, Alexander Knox. I was the reporter going to report on the movie back then. Sort of the smart-ass character. That's me. So that's why. So we get in my work to see a lot more about Knox. What happens when Knox's job goes from hunting an urban legend to actually trying to find out, cover Batman as a beat every day? We have the Commissioner Gordon and Harvey Dent. How do you do law enforcement when you've got a guy like Batman around? How do you actually make arrests stick? What advice? One thing that's different with these pictures is the Commissioner Gordon, Pat Hingle, is older than most of the other Commissioner Gordons we've seen. He's ready to retire, and now Batman showed up. Maybe he becomes more of a mentor for Batman. And so these were things that I was able to explore. I was also able to go in and say, we're between the movies. So what did Matt Schreck think about the Joker? What did Catwoman, Selena Kyle, think about the Joker? As long as she doesn't meet Bruce Wayne, we can include these characters. And so we also include our own version of what we think one of the members of the Rogues Gallery would look like in the Burtonverse. Clayface is the Golden Age Clayface that we use, not the later Shannon Mound Clayface. We figured that Tim Burton would have made him much more like a Universal monster. He would have been much more like a Phantom of the Opera character. And this is the artist for Batman '89's rendition of our Clayface as he appears in Batman Resurrection. He's a very different character. There are other surprise characters in there. And so Batman Resurrection came out, audiobook, hardcover, and ebook October 15th. It is still going in multiple printings in hardcover. And we announced the sequel, Batman Revolution. Guess who's in that? Guess who's in that? And,
Spider-Man.
That is already out in pre-order. October 28th is when it comes out. At my table 2 downstairs in the writer's block, we have free posters. We also have a few copies of Batman Resurrection left to sell. We saved a box or 2 for today. And so when this comes out, this will continue to expand the story. It is the longest novel I have ever written, so it's significantly longer than the existing one. And I turned it in on Tuesday. So. I polled the readers for their favorite lines from Batman. You want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts was number 1. Have you ever danced with the devil in a pale moonlight? There's other ones that I just happen to like. I don't know if it's art, but I like it. The kind of truly mighty with the sword. There are lines I will not use. You weigh a little more than 108. We've got no future chapter, hey one nut boy. I'm the world's first fully functioning homicidal artist. Is that you, Sugar Bumps? Look, you're a nice girl, I really like you a lot, but right now, shut up. These are the lines I will not put in your book, just for legal purposes. Yeah, hello guys. Anyway, that is the legacy of Batman, and couple of questions about Batman, about the movies, about the books. We got it right back there.
When you showed the comic book sales in '66 and then in '80, there was a huge drop-off.
Yes.
You know what happened? Like 1.1 million being first.
Yeah, that would be inflation of the 1970s. DC actually collapses in the 1970s. There's something called the DC implosion. Comics go from being 12 cents per copy in 1968 to 60 cents per copy in 1982. And so that is a multiple of 5 over the course of 14 years. And in that period, all of the places that were carrying comics on the spinner racks were getting rid of them. If it were not for the comic shops, there would not be a comics industry now. The comic shops saved the industry. This is one of the great things about the story of comics, is we invent things to get us out of it. After that big boom in the early 90s, we nearly went away again. What saved us? The graphic novel. The fact that we were actually able to reprint and republish all of our older material and put that stuff out there on shelves for people. But 50 years ago when a comic book came out, if it didn't sell the first time, it got trashed. There was no way to read that story. And now it's almost impossible to find something that is not in print somewhere, except for certain issues of mine, and I'm upset about that. Other questions, comments? Right back there.
What are your thoughts on the plans they have with Robin in Batman Returns?
Batman Returns Robin, yeah. They didn't have room for him in the first movie. They were going to put him in the first movie. Marlon Wayans was cast for the second movie. That, likewise, he did not survive a script revision. There were other issues involving the actor at the time. However, that version of the character is in the Batman '89 comics from DC. And so he develops into a sort of a more Nightwing kind of a character. You had a question?
Okay, so kind of leaving off that question, how would you do Robin differently?
How would I do Robin differently? Right now, I'm just between the 2 movies, so he's a loner. He's not at all. I don't want to step on the toes of the guys doing the new stuff. However, I do bring that character. I do bring the Wayans character into our books, so you actually can see my take on him. I always try to make everything fit, and if there's already a version of the character, I'm trying to do that character. Any more questions? Just real quick.
So you mentioned all of the backlash around the casting of Batman.
Yeah.
What were the feelings back in 1989 about the casting of Jack Nicholson as?
Oh, there were actually, I actually found some of those. I said, this guy can't possibly take this thing seriously. And it's just going to be a payday for him or whatever. But in the 60s, it was actually sort of a sign of prestige for an actor to show up on the Batman series. There's a lot of big name people on that show. And so, now what Jack did was he got a contract that gave him more money than anybody had ever gotten on a movie. I think that's $60 million. Now there were people that were concerned about that. There were people that were concerned about everything. And so we were frightened. We were terrified. What does that number say? That's the Times Upside. I am sorry, folks. I am in table 2, directly downstairs. We have about a case and a half or two of these. And we also have the Batman Revolution posters. They are free. So,
Thank you for watching this episode of Legends and Theories. Please subscribe, like the video, share the video, leave a comment, check out the video on screen, and may the Force be with you.